Good evening and welcome. Hello, my name is Chris Bendall. I'm the CEO and Director of Critical Stages Touring. Thank you very much for joining us here this evening online for our digital premiere broadcast of A Birthday Cake. A Birthday Cake was written by Ross Mueller and directed by Peter Houghton, created by Ross and Louise Siversen, and the performance you'll see this evening is performed by Louise. I would first like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you this evening from Wongal country and acknowledge elders past and present. I'm coming to you from a Sydney in lockdown, and where it is a cold and rainy lockdown evening, but I hope it's a more pleasant evening for others in other parts around the country in Australia and New Zealand, where I think we have people joining us this evening. I'm so pleased that so many of you found the time to join us to share this premiere screening. Judging by our RSVPs, we hopefully have people joining us now from Canberra, Melbourne, Sydney, Darwin, Geelong, Hobart, Toowoomba, Albury, Yarra Ranges, Auckland, and because I can't see all the people actually in attendance, possibly more. So welcome to you all and thank you. Critical Stages Touring, for those who don't know, is Australia's national touring theatre company. Like so many arts organisations around the world, we have had to adapt considerably to the changing times. One of the positives from the very difficult time last year that we all experienced was finding the opportunity to support artists in ways that we hadn't been able to previously. And through our digital adaptation process, this involved developing new work and sharing the results of these processes through digital forums such as this. Over the past year, we began creative development on new projects, including Alphabetical Sydney, a new musical for young audiences by Hilary Bell and Antonia Pizzonti, with music by Greta Gertler-Gold, The End of Winter by Noelle Janishevska, directed by Kate Gall, and Black Sun, Blood Moon, written by myself and designed by Isla Shaw. Each of these works are set to premiere next year. This work, A Birthday Cake, was first developed in conjunction with Malthouse Theatre, with this development supported by the City of Melbourne and Geelong Arts Centre, this stage of the development, I should say. It was filmed at and with the support of Geelong Arts Centre. Now about this evening. In a few moments, I'm going to introduce each of our key artists. Just to say, if you're using an Android or iOS device, you may be able to see a CC button on your viewer for automatic live captions. If not, this whole broadcast will be captioned by YouTube after we finish and being live. So that version will be on our website without artist interaction and will be live captioned also. So you'll be able to see these later on. So now I would like to introduce our key artists to join us this evening. Louise, last thing, a bit of housekeeping to say, if you're watching us on StreamYard, you won't be able to make comments, but if you're watching us on YouTube, then you will be able to engage in the comments and we'll have a Q&A at the end after the screening. So now to introduce our artists, I'd like to welcome Louise Siversen. Louise is one of our most admired and acclaimed actors who has worked in film and TV, all the major theatre companies in the country, and who you are bound to have seen in one guise or another on your TV and in film in roles over the years. So Louise, thank you very much for joining us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Peter Houghton is an acclaimed actor, writer and director, a wonderful artist whose work you may know from The Pitch, Endgame, A Commercial Farce, and many, many more shows. The Pitch actually toured with Critical Stages many years ago. Am I right, Pete? I can't remember how long ago.
It might have even been the first show, I think, that you toured all those years ago. Yeah.
I think actually it was the first Critical Stages show that I ever saw at Subiaco Arts Centre in Perth.
Yeah,
quite possibly.
I remember you in the foyer.
See, there we go.
Yes,
and Ross Mueller, lastly, is a multi-award-winning playwright whose work I have long admired. He has been performed at major theatres around the country, and you may know him from his work on The Ghostwriter, Construction of the Human Heart, The Glory, Concussion, many, many more. Ross, thank you very much for joining us from Newcastle.
Good to be here.
Louise and Peter from Melbourne, am I right?
That's right.
Yes, we're actually free citizens at the moment. We're crossing our fingers. It's not looking that good. Yeah.
And Ross is also in the free city of Newcastle.
Yeah, I think that I'm not saying anything because we've been pretty fortunate here. So yeah, it's good while we've got it.
Whereas last year, when this work, about a year ago, Ross actually called, more than a year ago, Ross called me to talk about this project and share the fabulous script for A Birthday Cake with me, and I was just thrilled to read it. The black comedy dialogue and writing that just sparkled, leapt off the page and kind of gripped you. So we were obviously very keen to support the development plans. Geelong Arts Centre was similarly taken by the project, and Ross, as you were based in Geelong at the time, that was a natural fit. But when we actually were planning to develop the work, Victoria was in lockdown. And so it was delayed, I don't know how many times, before finally being rehearsed and shot. Was in November?
Yep, that's right, November. Yeah, leading up to the final days of December, yes.
So, Pete, do you want to talk to us a little bit about what we're going to see? And
yes, so we, as you're saying, yes, indeed, yeah. Well, as you were saying, Chris, most of the work on this was done during 2019, 2020. I think one of the kind of features of it actually is that because of that kind of crazy, tumultuous year, obviously having COVID and, you had the Trump thing going on, you had the pandemic, you had political kind of chaos. The kind of play in some ways was sort of marinated in all of that. The end of the kind of last phase of the Me Too thing last year. So I kind of feel in a way that it sort of soaked all that stuff up into its DNA, and maybe even more so because in Melbourne in particular we were in a pretty full-on lockdown here, and so we were all in our own kind of modules, sort of marinating in these stories, and so Ross and Louise have created this kind of firecracker of a play. I mean, it's worth considering that this is a solo show, a classic solo show. With with Louise, obviously, who is, as you were saying, is really one of the great kind of firecracker talents of this country, I think, in terms of delivering theatrical scale performance, and all that stuff that the play soaked up from that year, I think, kind of comes out in the most unexpected ways in this piece. It's a black comedy. It's also a forensic examination of this woman who takes us to the edge of kind of madness and back. As a kind of what you're about to see today is our response to the COVID problem last year, really, which was that we kept trying to start this thing and went, how do you start it? We weren't allowed to be in the same room often. We weren't allowed to, we just couldn't, and rightly so, but we couldn't actually work with each other. And so we got a lot of this conversations happening on formats like this. Eventually, Geelong Arts Centre kindly supported the project, as did you guys at Critical Stages. And we thought, well, the actual idea of putting on a play at the moment, it seems almost kind of crazy. Why don't we film something? And I think what you're about to see, for me, it's not quite a film. It's not a feature film. It's not quite theatre. If anything, I'd say it's a sort of a record of the beginning of our process to rehearse this piece. So it's an exploration of character, hearing the language, working with Ross's words, working with Louise's performance to try and start to get a flavour of what this thing can be. The space you see is all the rehearsal room at Geelong Arts Centre, which is actually a beautiful space, lighting wise, and in terms of just the kind of scale of it. Actually, it's a beautiful, big, kind of airy sort of space with its own presence. And so we thought, well, why don't we do a kind of cross between really a sort of a rehearsal and a kind of behind the scenes sort of look at an actor beginning to prepare. These are not the costumes, this is not the set. But for me, it captures something pretty exciting, actually, which is, the tenor of this play, which is kind of slightly dangerous, slightly dramatic, very funny, I think. And obviously, Louise, up to her old tricks, being a very clever being a very clever actor, I think,
Thanks, Pete. And just before we start, I just want to give Ross and Louise a chance to just talk a little bit to us about the inspiration for the work and how the process began for you both.
Do you want me to start, Roscoe?
Yeah.
Okay. Ross and I have got many decades history together, creating work and throwing ideas around. And we had the opportunity to work together in 2016 on a one-woman show that Ross had written, where I played Malcolm Turnbull. And it was the night before the election, and it was what was going through Malcolm's head at that time. And after that experience of being in the room, just having this opportunity to really interrogate a piece just between the two of us, we talked about making another play where we could repeat that experience for ourselves, but take into it something that we wanted to interrogate. And it began actually from the point of view of looking at a woman who wanted to kind of drive a cult in a way, to look at the nature of what fanaticism is about. And that took us off on a lot of tangents until eventually we came to this place. But it was very much rooted in the idea of a sense of a woman taking up a new environment, being a foreigner in a new environment, which is invested into the DNA of this play for very important reasons. So that drove what we wanted to investigate. And then as time passed, other elements started collecting into the vortex of the play, and it's now in the form that it's in. So I don't know, Ross has probably got other thoughts on that as well.
I reckon that's a pretty good summation. And one of the things that we were always interested in was pushing the boundaries of what a woman can say on stage. And I think we were both pretty angry about stuff, weren't we, Louise? And so
yeah.
I'm not sure that anger has subsided too much. But so we wanted to create a character that could capture that sense of rage and embody that and see how far we could push the limits. And I must say, some of the earlier drafts really did push those limits.
One of the things that really drove it. One of the things that really drove it was because when I did I Can't Even, the production that kind of spearheaded us off onto this idea of creating a one-woman show, I was playing a man, and when I came off stage, a lot of people said to me, "Oh, wasn't he great? He's so kind of authoritative, and he was really driving, the news of this piece." And I thought to myself, "But he wasn't. It was a woman." And then Ross and I got into a conversation about how women are allowed to be as long as they're not being a woman. And the size of that and the quality of that really interested both Ross and I, because it's about a woman being publicly rage-filled, which seems to be one of the bastions which people are continuing to have a problem about. So I think this play is pretty much charged up with that.
I think that's a great place to live. On that note,
it's a family story about rage.
Family story, but advisory warning now, not necessarily for family audiences. There is a language warning coming for those of you who are about to watch. And thank you, Robbie, if you want to play the video for our audience now, and we will join you afterwards for more questions and a chance for Q&A with those of you joining us as well. Thank you, Ross, Louise and Peter, and enjoy.
Stenographer, I can tell you that one of the major symptoms of OCD is an overwhelming need to confess, even when the transgressions are slight. In the beginning, what is confessed may seem minor. The need for a coffee, the desire for a cigarette, but as the confessions are collected, the confessor is compelled to continue. They cannot contain their need. Okay, let's be honest. I'm talking about Jason, my husband. Maybe I should tell you the story that begins one night Jason comes home from the stud. My husband's a horse trainer, and one night he comes home after a hard day on the stud, and he decides that he wants to confess to me that he's feeling attracted to a horse. One horse in particular. Helen, is this okay with you? I am consumed by a fog of intelligence, brains leaking onto the floor, serious faces and suntan necks. These people are masters, PhDs, the bottom of the barrel of retired history teachers and librarians. This group of volunteers shit out words I can't even spell, like a series of satisfying bowel movements. They deliver long and articulate answers. They're interested in the advancements of stratigraphical excavations, on-site processing and documentation, and with every passing voice, I am sinking. Up next is a retired Marine from Tennessee who's been all over Iraq and Afghanistan twice. I've rocked the cradle of humanity and I can't wait to work with you, Doc. I want to scream. I am an imposter. Sweating bullets. Circle is racing. Answers are smarter, sentences longer. My brain shuts down, my lungs compress. I'm pretty sure I've reached a perfect state of cardiac arrest. I mean, what the hell is stratigraphical? I thought we were just going to dig. Alex smiles and claps his hands. Next, Elena, from Australia. What are you doing here? Elena, what are you hoping to find? First time I went to the theatre, I was 6 years old, for my birthday. My grandmother purchases 2 tickets for us to see Camelot. It's a musical about a king and a queen and a horse, I think. I don't like to use the word remember, but I remember this vivid jewel box of magic and music and the songs carrying me into euphoria, while a steady stream of blood was rushing from my knee, turning my long white socks red, filling my shoe with gore. Why didn't you say something, sweetheart? Maybe I should tell you that I buy 4 tickets for the theatre for August 12th. My plan was to reunite the family for the boys' birthdays, fight the darkness and celebrate the light. Or maybe I should tell you that I establish a routine. It goes pancakes, lunches, pick up and drop off, laundry, and I go to the gym. Pancakes, lunches, pick up and drop off. Pancakes, lunches, pick up and drop off, and I smash it out at the gym. I am clearer and stronger than I have ever been. And then suddenly, in the middle of my own fucking driveway, a call. I'm just off to the gym. Oh, yeah? Well, why don't you just keep on fucking going, Helen? Why don't you just keep on fucking going so we don't have to see you anymore? Drop out of sight. Drop off a fucking cliff. It doesn't matter. I'm not kidding. Just fuck right off. You're a clever woman, Helen. But you're really doing a number on Jace, aren't you? All this epiphany shit. It's fucking with his head and it's damaging my business. He is a good man. He took you in from nothing. He paid off your father's debts, so you owe him with your life. Now get with the program or get out of Dodge. I'm fucking warning you. Leave him the fuck alone, or we all go down together.
Well, thank you everyone for joining us for this, and congratulations to all the creative team on creating that. I just want to put a shout out again one more time to Geelong Arts Centre. Thank you for your support. As you can see, we had an opportunity to explore fabulous new Geelong Arts Centre renovations through that process, with the team filming in many interesting locations all around the building. So it was a fantastic experience for everybody there. So I hope you enjoyed that taste tester. I'd love to bring our artists back again to tell you a little bit more and to open up to questions. But to begin with, Ross, do you want to talk to us a little bit about how those 4 scenes sit into the piece as a whole, where those scenes are sitting in the story and the narrative?
Well, I think maybe Pete's better to speak to that. He was the editor-in-chief who chose those pieces. So can I hand over to you, Pete, on that?
Yes, of course, yeah. It was quite a little fiddly little exercise, actually, because in some ways we really don't want you to know what happens. So we're kind of hiding. We're sort of hiding a pretty major plot point, which even now I don't want to tell you. But as you can see from the way she's dealing with Cole, that last scene where she's sort of having a head-to-head with her husband's kind of best mate and business partner, it gets pretty aggressive and pretty out of control until these two kind of contending forces sort of meet each other. I'll give you one clue. The beginning of the big showdown happens in a theatre foyer and ends up with Louise's character standing and the other character on his knees. But I won't say anything more than that.
Subtle,
look, it's kind of
subtle.
It's interesting.
In considerable pain.
Considerable pain. Watching that, actually, and what's interesting to me about that is that, Louise is such a beautiful screen performer too, obviously, and I think the performance you're seeing there is very much in the scale of screen and beautifully observed. The theatre version kind of takes that and goes on to, kind of puts it on steroids, really. And as Ross was saying, this play about rage and that you were filling in there, Louise, about having the permission to sort of come out. And I mean, you begin to get a hint of that there. I think the sort of language and aggression and kind of scale that this character starts to take on is really almost kind of classical in its size, I think, and to be honest, for me, I mean, it's interesting the last sort of year. I mean, I've watched so much film and television, as we all have. We've been on Netflix or whatever it is. I've become so marinated in film performance that one of the things I really wanted to see when the theatre opened back up again was a gutsy actor coming centre stage and just giving me both barrels. And that's what this piece allows. I think.
Can I pick you up on that? Just to acknowledge one of the comments there that we've just had about it being intense and suspenseful. You mentioned when we were talking earlier about the nature of being a thriller, and what do you think are the challenges, of creating a thriller on stage, as opposed to the film format, in your ultimate vision for the piece?
Yeah, I think it's kind of. I mean, the thing I love about thriller is that it's all about point of view. So, thriller on film obviously works on point of view and all about what you can't see. So the reason you jump up out of your chair when you walk around a corner because a duck flew out of a wardrobe or, whatever trick they've used, is because you didn't see it coming. And how do you do that on stage, particularly in a solo show? You've really got to think that through as a kind of dramatic problem. And the best way to do that, I think, is that, you don't really know whether your narrator is reliable or not. If and there, as you can see there, Louise is also blessed with a considerable amount of charm, so she's sort of taking you into a world where, of course, you want to go with her because she's very accomplished and charming and seems to be someone that you can trust. But then she kind of, without giving too much away, sort of leads you down a garden path into a very kind of dramatic sort of conclusion and climax and a whole third act, really. Design-wise, that's where the fun starts as well for a director and a designer, is to try and create this sort of black box world in a way where you as an audience member are forensically sort of picking through, looking for clues, trying to work out what you can rely on and what you can't. I imagine we're playing in quite a lot of darkness, and things are kind of illuminated to you when we decide to do that, rather than the sort of sometimes common thing of coming in and seeing a whole stage lit, so you get a good 10 minutes as an audience member sitting around and looking at the stage and enjoying the design maybe almost completely before the play even begins. I think here the trick is to kind of hide a lot of it, actually, and sort of keep taking you into other rooms and unexpected turns and that sort of thing, which is really the which is really the job of thriller, I think, is to sort of keep delivering surprise all the way through to the end.
And you mentioned that there's the question of the unreliable narrator. Louise, is your character an unreliable narrator in this scenario? You mentioned that she's full of rage. Do you want to talk about the experience for an audience alongside? Do we trust you? Do we follow you? Do we fear you?
Of course you trust me. Of course you trust me.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't you trust me?
Do you want to talk to us a little bit about your character?
Helen is in a privileged position economically. She lives in very comfortable surroundings, but she's a woman who has subsumed her own talent and her own possibilities to allow other people to accomplish things in her life and in their lives. And she's coming to a point where she's realized that that probably wasn't a good choice, and that she's aligned herself with influences that have not been the most profitable for her as a human being in terms of her development. And now she's looking at herself through this very dark lens and finding what she sees is not as she would have wished it to have become. And she's looking around her and seeing what those influences have developed in her home environment and beyond that. And I think that's not only startling in how it's received, but it's deeply damaging to her psychologically. So it's a very intense psychological journey for her that she goes on through the lens of this family and what happens to her family as a result.
And I guess to follow on from that is, I mentioned that there was an earlier development as well where you did actually get to have an audience at the Malthouse. Do you or Ross want to talk about what the experience was like for an audience watching the show then, and how they connected with you, with your character?
Well, I think one of the things that Ross and I, in a way, were hoping for, but in another way, we're completely unprepared for, was some of the commentary that we got after a couple of the showings we did, which was that people were enraged at themselves for going along with Helen as a consequence of what actually happens in the play. They were really shocked at themselves because they'd become engaged with Helen. She was endeared to them. So by the end of the play, when what happens, they couldn't extract themselves from liking Helen, which I think is always a really wonderful thing when you've got a character who unfolds in an unpredictable way. You want an investment from the audience, and we were able to achieve that. And that was a great thing for Ross and I, that was achieved in those readings and in those presentations, and now we've got a whole play in which we can do that in. So it'll be wonderful to see what happens as a result of that. Ross,
I think, yeah, you're right. And I think one of the starting points that we had, Louise, you might remember, is we sort of got a bit fascinated with the idea of a true crime podcast, and how true crime has become our entertainment, that people are happy to listen to on the tram on their way to work, or and the lives behind those crimes can sometimes be edited out for the entertainment of the audience. So I think there was something about that when, in the first time that we presented it to a group of people, we weren't quite sure how it was going to be received, because for us, we'd sort of spent a couple of weeks in a room making each other laugh, but also pushing each other to sort of awkward and difficult spaces and difficult emotional spaces. And I think that's where Louise and I have always connected as creatives, is that nexus point of discomfort and just pure entertainment. And the first audience, I think, was gobsmacked and and really felt bad about laughing, at certain points, which is exactly what we want. That's exactly what we want. That's kind of like what Peter's talking about with theatre is, with screen culture, you've got a chance to pause it and say, should I be laughing at this? But in theatre, your immediate reaction can't be edited out. You can't pause yourself. And so your inclusion in that performance is essential to the actual overall community experience by the end. And whether we embrace the character of Helen and her actions or not can be, dictated by the people that we're sitting next to as well. And if they start laughing, perhaps we will as well. And we're going to enjoy this blood sport. So
I think it's a really good point, Ross. Remembering the live element that's to come in the piece, where we'll be able to embrace that again on the dialogue the audience will have with Louise's character in that way. We've had a question from James Edwards. I guess the obvious question is what happens with this piece next? That could be twofold. I wonder if you mean in terms of the narrative or in terms of the project. I'm going to take that as the project itself. Peter, do you want to talk a little bit to that with the plans and what sort of we're looking to do and what we need to keep going?
Well, I think what happens, Chris, is that the presenters and producers give large amounts of money to us, almost all of which we spend on the show. Okay. Some of it, we obviously, a short holiday. No, I think the other thing about a solo show, of course, is that I've actually been working on another piece at the moment, and I've come to the conclusion that no play is ever finished, and you're always working on it until the closing night and beyond. But my view of this piece is there's a play is that it's ready to rehearse. And so really our plan from here on in is to get production ready. We should point out there is a finished complete script. We've only seen sections of it, but there is a complete script yet.
Yeah, I've finished it about 5 or 6 times.
Yes, that's right.
There is complete work.
You're still good at finishing things. Just do it again. I do feel that the kind of obvious thing to do now is to get into a rehearsal room and play with this thing and get it to be everything it can be. And it's sort of and to add design to it. Actually, I think your question before about thriller, Chris, is a good one because you kind of obviously a large part of this is is driven by Louise too. And the solo performance, it's kind of you get no time off. You're there all day, acting your socks off. But our responsibility from a production point of the side of things is to really meet that performance with something that matches it and lifts it. And as we're saying with a thriller or a piece that's kind of based a little bit on smoke and mirrors and magic, that's kind of something that I'm really excited about. I think just finding out how you kind of add this unseen hand to it that sort of keeps playing with the audience's sort of point of view. And the short answer to that is I think we need to get into a rehearsal room and start doing it. Could it use more development? Well, I guess everything can, but I do feel confident about jumping into a rehearsal process now towards production. Yeah.
So I guess we're saying we're looking for presentation partners and venue, festival, etc., to give us to be able to help kickstart this into its premiere season, and beyond that, see where it can travel and live its life and further develop. But there's potential for further development if the opportunity arose. But the team is ready to go into rehearsal. We have another question, or sort of part observation, part question, which follows on really well actually from what you were just saying, Peter. The stamina needs to be remarkable. And so I guess thinking in there about what else is, how else you're planning to support that. As you say, you're looking for soundscape and production design to kind of, augment and shape the production. But is there anything else you want to add to what you were just talking about?
Well, it's kind of, yes, all of that. I think, I've actually done quite a few solo shows myself over the years, and there even something. I remember speaking to Pamela Rave about this years ago. She was doing a solo show about Virginia Woolf, and she sat almost the entire time, And I said to her, "How do you feel after that?" And she said, "Exhausted." And this is not sitting down, this piece. This is an exceptionally physical piece, and a kind of emotional piece, and being comedy. I mean, there's a precision in comedy that's kind of often underestimated, I think. I mean, obviously, we have Louise, but yeah, it's the kind of physique of the performer, I think, that's such a huge part of this. And I think when I spoke to you this morning, Louise, I said, "Where are you?" And said, "I'm doing squats in the gym." And that was an unrelated issue, but it's worth saying though that there's not a lot of, I mean, it's a bit of a cliche to say that all actors are kind of really fit and all this thing. They aren't, but Louise is.
Well, Louise, do you want to talk to how you keep your stamina for a solo performance?
One thing I will say about this particular show, which was surprising to me when we were doing the developments, at various stages, is that this show has a really strong energy of its own. It's interesting that Pete's quoting Pam's experience of doing something sitting down, which can be utterly exhausting. But some pieces give you, and some pieces take from you. That's my experience anyway of being an actor. And this piece actually has a life that's so stupendously explosive that it kind of picks you up in a strange way. And also because it's dark humor, you're riding a lot on the return from your audience, which you would hope they were laughing. And that can drive you very, very strongly when you're in a house. But I do find this piece has a life of its own that you just hook onto, and it'll carry you a lot, which isn't my experience of doing, for instance, several years ago when I did Noises Off. That's not a play that carries you. That's a play that takes from you. So this play is the reverse of that, which is very interesting because it's a much darker play. So that would be my answer to that. But Pete and Ross and I have also spoken a lot about a lot of other conceptual ideas that would be married into this piece that would also pick up some of the other heavy lifting of it, which I think is an interesting cornerstone of where the play ends.
Great.
Again, we're not talking about it at the moment.
And look, we're going to wrap in a moment. So I'll ask anyone watching if you want to ask any final questions of our creatives. Ross, I just wondered if you wanted to give us a bit of an insight into the challenges of creating a stage work on screen during a lockdown last year from your perspective.
No, there was no challenge. It was very easy. I'd do it again tomorrow. The chance to work with Pete and Louise is just, at this stage in my career, it's like meeting up at a school reunion with people that you actually like. That's something that I've never done before. But it's, I think that's just one of the things that we're talking about, how do you maintain that energy as a performer for the show too? Well, we've created it together. And so I guess I'm sort of looking at it and saying, well, it's not like the actor has gone to the library and picked up a piece of text and gone, well, this was written by somebody 100 years ago and I've got to learn how to make the words work. So I think because we've created it together, we've sort of worked with each other's understanding of rhythms and what we need to create momentum for the show. And so, it's like as a composer writing for, Louise's Yo-Yo Ma or someone like that,
and to note that
you know what this person is capable of, and it's exciting to work with people like that.
And it's part of the synchronicity that I think comes through, that to know that this is written with Louise's voice and persona in mind. Look, we have one last question, which is a question for all. What has it been like writing and performing multiple characters for the one person to perform, especially when Louise crosses genders and plays a man? Maybe that's a question for anyone, for Louise or Ross and Peter.
Well,
look, I can only speak.
Yeah.
Sorry.
You speak, Louise. It's you speak.
I can only speak from my experience of having worked with both Ross and Pete before, but in this particular instance with my collaborations with Ross, because he's written a voice for me in a number of productions. I can't tell you how wonderful that is to do that, because the writer captures, in this case Ross captures elements of me that then get to have a full-blown life, and that's incredibly moving to do that. I mean, even talking about it moves you. You find yourself being at your top tilt in the most expansive, free, liberated way, and to do that on stage is such a blessing and such a privilege. So that's my experience of it anyway.
Fabulous.
Can I ask
Thank you.
Can I ask you a little question there about, it's just an interesting thing to open up there. I thought about, do you feel when you walk off stage after you've done something like that, that people see you differently, or the audience feel like they know you differently, when it's like that thing of, because it's interesting having work tailored for you, isn't it? It is, as you were saying, Ross, I mean, it is very different from pulling something off the shelf. Is it kind of, I mean, or another way of that, I guess, is that, do you feel like you find parts of yourself that are there and that surprise you?
I think both things, Pete. I think you're elevated in a kind of emotional form in the eye of the audience. They go, oh wow, you know, that I didn't know that about her, but I also didn't know that about a female. And then I think also in doing that, sometimes again, only speaking from the perspective of working with Ross sees things in me that I don't necessarily see. And then when and I'll often turn to him and say, really? You see, like, that's how you see me? He goes, yeah. I go, wow, okay. Rip the lid off this.
This is how you see it.
Let's do it.
It's the only way to tell you.
Why didn't you tell me about that?
Probably quite terrifying, really.
So it can be very uplifting, but it can also be kind of shocking.
Fabulous. Does anyone have any final comments you'd like to share, Ross? Would you like to?
Yeah, I think our starting point has always been story, and that you know, when you go to the theatre, that's primarily why you're going in post-lockdown. I think is to share a story with people that you can sit in the dark together and know that you're engaged. And you know, Louise is a great storyteller, and you know, just about that comment about crossing between genders. You know, when she tells stories, you know, she swaps between genders all the time, and the idea of, you know, what's the right voice to embody this part is sort of our starting point, I think. So I think if you enjoy story and you enjoy finding a truth in human experience, you will enjoy Birthday Cake.
And if you like people who wear glasses, you'll love this.
All right, on that note, I'm going to say a few things in closing, but thank you, Louise, thank you, Ross, thank you, Peter, for joining us this evening. So please, those watching, please get in touch with us if you'd like to find out more, especially if you're interested in partnering with us and with our co-producer, Real Time Content. Get in touch with me or Emma Corrick if you're interested in being part of a premiere performance or touring season. If you're interested in any of our other work, in seeing that come to a theatre near you, such as Alphabetical Sydney, Black Sun Blood Moon, or End of Winter, or any of our other touring projects, you can also get in touch with us. We have some amazing tours planned for next year and beyond. If you're interested in seeing more of our digital work, you can head to the screening room. www.criticalstages.com.au/screening-room. There are a wonderful array of shows there to check out, including The Curve, a multi-writer project that was filmed in front of a live audience at Fringe HQ earlier this year, written by Vanessa Bates, Katie Pollock, Lachlan Philpott, Susie Miller, and Mary Rachel Brown. I think I got everyone. Lamb by Jane Bodie and Mark Seymour is also there and available at the moment, and wonderful content from Baloo Creative with webisodes from the Rovers series. And I should say, though Sydney is in lockdown, the rest of the country is not, and we have 4 tours circling the country right now. We have rovers in Victoria heading towards Geelong Arts Centre actually at the end of this week. So if you're in that area, please do go and check it out. And then heading to Healesville next week. We also have. We've just completed a tour of Hamlet, Prince of Skidmark. He checks his calendar. We have Them by Samar Sabawi in rehearsal, opening at Arts Centre Melbourne very soon. And we've also just completed a tour of The Bottle Collector. And we've got I've Been Meaning to Ask You opening at Darwin Festival. So we've got tours all around the country, even while Sydney is in lockdown. I would like to thank you for joining us this evening. I would like to thank our partners again, Geelong Arts Centre, City of Melbourne, as well as our key critical stages partners, Create New South Wales, Australia Council for the Arts, and the Office of the Arts. Thank you for joining us. Thank you to all my team for making this happen this evening, especially Robbie James and Mel Carolyn. Take care, stay safe, and stay well. See you next time.